Good morning. I'm Dwight Kane. I'm Chair of the Kansas Corporation Commission. I'm joined this morning by fellow Commissioner Susan Duffy and Commissioner Andrew French. At this time, I will call to order this meeting of the Kansas Corporation Commission on this March 3rd, 2022. First items up for our consideration this morning are 11 consent agenda items. Commissioners, you've had the opportunity to review the draft orders in each of these. So I would, at this time, ask if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, and I begin with Commissioner Duffy.
Good morning, Chair Keen. I have no questions or comments.
Thank you. Commissioner French.
Good morning. No questions. I move approval of the consent agenda.
And I second Commissioner French's motion.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda. Is there any further discussion? By hearing none, I will call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries. The consent agenda is approved. Originally, we were to have 6 notice items. This morning, we are down to 4. The first of these, the other 2 will be reserved or deferred for further future consideration. The first notice item is docket number 21-EKME-329-GIE. This is in the matter of the investigation into Evergy, Kansas Metro and Evergy, Kansas Central regarding the February 2021 winter weather events as contemplated by docket number 21-GIMX-303-MIS. Before us this morning is an order setting the procedural schedule. And for that, we'll turn to our General Counsel, Brian Fedottin. Good morning, Brian.
Yes, good morning, Commissioners. On February 25th, the parties presented a 2-track procedural schedule, and which track we proceed under depends on whether a settlement can be reached by April 22nd. Under the track 1, a hearing on the settlement would be on May 11th with a commission order due June 10th. Under track 2, there would be a settlement deadline of July 15th with testimony in support or opposition due a week later. An evidentiary hearing August 2nd with a commission order due October 3rd. This order notes that due to the ongoing pandemic, the hearings are scheduled to be conducted by Zoom, but that's obviously subject to change. This order goes into more detail, but grants this procedural schedule as proposed by the parties. With that, I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Brian. Commissioners, any questions, comments, or concerns, beginning with Commissioner French?
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Duffy.
No questions. I move approval of the order as described.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. We approve the order in this docket. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. The order is approved. Next noticed item up is docket number 21-KGSG-332-GIG. This is in the matter of the investigation into Kansas Gas Service Company, a division of One Gas Inc., regarding the February 2021 winter weather events as contemplated by docket number 21-GIMX-303-MIS. Before us this morning is an order on unanimous settlement agreement on the waiver of penalties under the Kansas Gas Service tariff. And again, our presenter is our General Counsel, Brian Fedottin.
Yes, thank you. On February 9th, Kansas Gas Service Company, or KGS, issued an operational flow order, or OFO, for its transportation customers to begin on February 11th, 2021 and remain in effect until future notice. On February 14th, 2021, KGS determined it was necessary to further restrict usage for all but residential and human needs customers, and it issued a curtailment notice to become effective February 15th, 2021 and remain in effect till further notice. So on May 28th, KGS filed a motion for limited waiver of section 11.06 of its tariff. And that section details how penalties are calculated. In its motion for a limited waiver, KGS explained that under its tariff, once it's determined that penalties should be assessed, it has no discretion or flexibility on calculating the penalties. Due to the extraordinary high market gas prices experienced during the OFO and period of curtailment, or POC, KGS believed that the resulting penalties to marketers and individually balanced transportation customers would be extraordinary and sought a waiver from section 1106 to allow it to remove the multiplier from the penalty calculations. On January 20th, 2022, the parties filed a motion to approve a unanimous settlement agreement in this matter. And on February 4th of this year, the commission held a hearing on the settlement agreement on the waiver of the penalties under the tariff. The unanimous settlement, while not signed off on by everybody, is unopposed, which makes it a unanimous settlement as defined by KAR 82-1-230A. And when approving a unanimous settlement, we must make an independent finding as to whether the settlement is supported by substantial competent evidence, will establish just and reasonable rates, and is in the public interest. This order finds the unanimous settlement is supported by substantial competent evidence. There's evidence that absent the unanimous settlement agreement, the penalties under the tariff would be so large as it could risk sending many of the marketers and individually balanced transportation customers into bankruptcy, which would have a detrimental impact on the Kansas economy. If KGS was unable to collect the penalties from the marketers and individually balanced transportation customers, its sales customers, which include residential and small commercial customers, would bear the cost of all purchased gas used during the OFO and POC days. The commission finds the unanimous settlement agreement fairly represents a balance of the relevant interests and is supported by the evidence. Consistent with the parties' positions, this order finds that approving the unanimous settlement agreement is in the public interest. While the penalty provisions date back to the late 1990s, penalties have never been levied under those provisions. KGS sought a waiver so marketers and individually balanced transportation customers would only be responsible for the volume of unauthorized gas usage multiplied by the index price of gas. And with one exception, the aggregate penalties represent the total unauthorized gas usage multiplied by a negotiated gas price. Symmetry is the exception. And the evidence shows that absent the unanimous settlement agreement, there was no guarantee that Symmetry, the entity subject to the largest penalty, would have paid anything. But under the unanimous settlement agreement, Symmetry agreed to provide a $26 million corporate guarantee, which ensures the timely payment of its full penalty, full negotiated penalty. While under the settlement agreement, Symmetry's penalty is reduced by approximately $6.1 million. That's less than the $6.3 million that KGS and its sales customers would incur in just a single year delay that could be attributed to litigation and appeals. So while reducing the penalty may be unpopular, it does benefit sales customers by ensuring Symmetry's ability to pay the penalty and eliminating potential litigation that would subject those sales customers to millions of dollars of additional carrying costs. This decision to waive penalties in this docket should not be viewed as precedential. Instead, it's a response to a unique and completely unprecedented situation, not something anybody expected to have to prepare for. So if confronted with an OFO and high gas prices in the future, it should not be assumed that the commission will waive penalties again. In this order, the commission finds the attached unanimous settlement agreement is supported by substantial competent evidence in the record, results in just and reasonable rates and is in the public interest. Thus, this order would approve the unanimous settlement agreement in its entirety. With that, I'm available for questions.
All right, thank you, Brian, for that overview. Commissioners, do you have any questions, comments, or concerns? I'll begin with Commissioner Duffy.
Thank you, Chair Keen. Just a couple of comments. First of all, this order does deal with waivers and penalties for transportation customers. We still have other issues as it relates to Kansas Gas Service that we will be dealing with in future months. However, the transportation companies, which were numerous churches, school districts, municipalities in this state, they rely on their marketers to provide them to go out and find their gas, and KGS pumps the gas through their pipelines. The marketers were unable to do their job during that really unprecedented time. As a result, KGS shored up these entities to ensure that their health and safety was protected as well. What this order does, I believe, in a very fair and judicious manner, it puts responsibility back on the transportation customers to pay a negotiated amount to cover their costs of the gas, so that residential customers are not stuck with that. I believe that, well, it's my understanding that this negotiated settlement took days and days and a lot of hours, and there was give and take on all sides. I believe it represents a good resolution to this issue, but I want to make sure that folks understand that if this situation would happen again, in that we would be faced with this terrible long-term freezing cold, that I do not believe, at least this commissioner, and I believe the commission, would not just act the same way. Everybody's on notice at this point. And there is some risk when you're a transportation customer and you're not receiving your gas from KGS and you choose to go through marketers, there is some risk. There is, as a result, some responsibilities and consequences that follow. And while here, I think we're trying to alleviate some of the horrific harm that could be done after the fact, going forward, it would be a new day. So I appreciate the efforts on all the parties and our staff, our attorneys who work to bring all of the folks and keep them around the table and have this agreement. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Duffy. Commissioner French, please.
Thank you. There's not much I can say that wasn't contained within Brian's description of the order itself, and Commissioner Duffy's comments. I will just echo my thanks to the parties for their hard work in developing the record. It's one thing to have a compromise come before you, but it's much more important for that compromise to be backed by a strong evidentiary record, which gives us a basis to find that it's reasonable. And in this case, our staff and others did a lot of work to audit all of these costs, to understand who was responsible for each portion of costs. And that's what gives me comfort in finding that this is a reasonable resolution. So I just want to make sure that I thank them for all of that underlying work, because it does provide us a firm basis to understand that this is an appropriate outcome. Thank you. And with that, I will move approval of the described order.
And I second the motion.
Thank you. Been moved and seconded that we approve the order. Is there any further discussion? I'd add my 2 cents worth in here at this point. I will certainly join with my fellow commissioners in commending all the parties for the long and arduous work that was involved in trying to come to this settlement agreement. To me, this docket presented a number of difficult balancing propositions and trade-offs. Each of these balancing propositions and trade-offs presented their own set of costs and benefits. All of them very difficult to reconcile. I think by agreeing to the terms of this settlement agreement, the commission is trying to strike a balance between the sales and transportation customers under a very unfortunate and difficult set of circumstances that, God willing, we will never be forced to repeat again. But I want to thank all the parties for their diligence and their perseverance in coming to and reaching this settlement agreement. Having said that, that concludes my comments. Before we move to a vote, are there any further comments from my fellow commissioners? Hearing none, I will call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. The order is approved. Thank you for your work as well in this effort, Brian.
You're welcome. Thank you, commissioners.
As I alluded to earlier, originally we had noticed 4 transportation items for consideration this morning. We will defer 2 of those. We will, however, take up 2 of those. The first of these is docket number 22-TRAM-410-PEN. This is in the matter of the investigation of Martin A. Juarez, DBA MI&G Trucking of Deerfield, Kansas, regarding the violations of the Kansas Motor Carrier Safety Statutes, rules, and regulations, and the commission's authority to impose penalty sanctions and/or the revocation of motor carrier authority. We have before us a penalty order this morning, and our presenter is Hassan Latif. Good morning, Hassan.
Good morning, commissioners. The penalty order before you is the result of an investigation of Martin A. Juarez, DBA MI&G Trucking, a common carrier that hauls grain, feed, and hay and manure operating out of Deerfield, Kansas. The investigation took place as a result of a complaint that the carrier was not complying with the motor carrier safety regulations. During the investigation, special investigators Penny Fryback and Erica Pargas found several violations, and the order before you assesses penalties for 10 of those violations, resulting in $4,750 in total penalties. The violations included, and I'll list a few of them, a $750 fine for failing to maintain minimum records of inspection and vehicle maintenance on the commercial motor vehicles driven, a $750 fine for failure to obtain documents and document a successful annual inspection on the commercial motor vehicles driven, a $650 fine for failure to require a driver to submit to a pre-employment alcohol and controlled substances test and obtain a negative result prior to allowing them to operate a CMV, a $650 fine for failing to ensure each driver has an equal chance of being selected for random alcohol and controlled substance testing, and a $500 fine for using a driver that did not have a valid US CDL. The remaining violations included failing to maintain driver qualification files and failure to provide alcohol and controlled substances training, among other things. Staff believes the $4,750 in penalties is the proper course of action to ensure compliance with the applicable motor carrier rules and regulations. And with that, staff recommends approval of this order. I and staff are available to answer any questions you have.
Thank you for that overview, Hassan. Commissioners, any questions, comments, or concerns? I'll begin this time with Commissioner French.
No questions. Thank you for the description, Hassan.
Thank you. Commissioner Duffy.
I have no questions, just a comment again. I believe that once we get a complaint, we're following through, and this is the normal protocol that we follow upon receiving a complaint. So with that, I move approval of the order as described.
Second.
Then moved and seconded that we approve the order and this docket. Is there any further discussion? I'll add just a bit of a kudo again to the staff of the Transportation Division certainly those in the field who are diligent and go through all of the efforts they undertake in trying to perform what is, I think, a critical safety function in motor carrier regulation. And so our hats are, I think, collectively all off to them. Thanks to them for their conscientious efforts. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. The order is approved. The next matter on our noticed agenda is docket number 22-TRAM-411-PEN. This is in the matter of the investigation of Marcos Medina, DBA M&B Transport of Garden City, Kansas, regarding the violations of the motor carrier safety statutes, rules, and regulations, and the commission's authority to impose penalty sanctions and/or the revocation of motor carrier authority. Again, before us is a penalty order in this matter. And again, our presenter is Hassan Latif. Hassan, please.
Thank you. The second penalty order before you is the result of an investigation of Marcos Medina, DBA M&B Transport, a common carrier that hauls grain, feed, and hay operating out of Garden City, Kansas. During this investigation, our special investigators, again, Penny Fryback and Erica Pargas, found several violations, and the order before you assesses penalties for 8 of those violations, resulting in $7,050 in total penalties. These penalties included a $1,000 penalty for failing to retain supporting documents for each load hauled, a $1,000 fine for operating interstate before obtaining an interstate US DOT registration, a $3,000 fine for hauling loads in excess of the maximum gross weight of 85,500 pounds allowed in Kansas. And our investigators found 21 violations of this type. A $500 fine for failure to require its drivers to complete a record of duty status, and a $500 fine for failure to obtain a fuel tax permit for Kansas. There were other violations, including failure to maintain a driver qualification file and failure to provide alcohol and controlled substance testing to its drivers, among other things. Staff believes the $7,050 in penalties is proper course of action to ensure compliance with the applicable motor carrier rules and regulations. And with that, staff recommends approval of this order. I and staff are available to answer any questions you have again.
Thank you, Hassan. Again, an excellent overview. Commissioners, any questions, comments, or concerns? I'll begin this time with Commissioner Duffy.
Thank you, Chair Keen. I would just note that all of these operators, once fined, are asked to file a corrective action plan within 30 days. Staff follows up. We really want them to be successful. We need them for our economic, for the economic generation in their community in terms of salaries and jobs, that sort of thing. But again, when you're overloaded 21 times, that's not only a severe safety issue, it's also a deterioration of our highways, and which leads to infrastructure damage. So again, there'll be follow-up on all of these companies to get them back where they need to be and have them operating in compliance. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner French.
No questions. I move approval of the order in this docket.
I second the motion.
Been moved and seconded that we approve the order in this docket. Is there any further discussion? I would add a very brief me too to this as well. I would subscribe to all of the observations made by Commissioner Duffy. And once again, add my gratitude to our transportation staff for their concern and their emphasis and their enforcement of important safety regulations. Having said that, is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I will call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries. The order is approved. Thank you again, Hassan.
Thank you.
I believe this comes, if I'm looking at our agenda correctly, this brings us to the end of our agenda. Unless commissioners have anything further you would like to have us consider this morning, I would entertain a motion to dismiss.
So moved.
Yes.
Second.
Looks like Commissioner French was wavering on really whether he wanted to.
I didn't know who I wanted to dismiss.
Yes. Right.
Well, I'm in favor of adjourning.
I'm not sure which of the motions I proposed he was in favor of, but I think we're all collectively in favor of adjourning. So on that motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you all. Be safe.
Take care.
Thank you. Be well.